Then, and we are live. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. We got TikTok rolling in here. We're getting people in the room. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Hi, Reggie. Hey, Yessie. And of course, right now, looks like Instagram's going to be a problem. Shocker. So let's maybe redo that one. I'm going to fix this real quick. Make sure. Maybe. All right. Good morning, everybody. Hello, hello. Come on in. Make yourself comfortable. Well, maybe I'm not adding it to Instagram. All right. Ooh, now I'm getting some feedback. All right. Hello, everybody. Good morning, Kelly. Good morning, Amy. Hello, hello. We've got Reverend Glenda here in the house. I'm so excited. My mentor. I know, Yessie, right. Yeah, my moderator and student says, Yessie says, she's as cute as you described her.
I like her already.
I know, right? I know. I do a pretty good Reverend Glenda imitation. Everything will be all right.
Everything's going to be all right.
All right. That's right. We're going to let people get in here and we're going to chat it up. We're going to see how things are going. We're going to talk about all things mediumship and Camp Chesterfield and spiritualism and all that. So we're going to buckle in for a good show. If you guys don't know, I'm Lorenda Carr. I'm a psychic medium here on TikTok, YouTube, and all the platforms. And we are talking today with Reverend Glenda Cadarette, my mentor through Camp Chesterfield. Good morning, Kelly. So if you guys are on TikTok, as much as I love you all here, you should go check out my, you'll be able to see Reverend Glenda live and in person on YouTube and Facebook. Instagram is being a problem, which no one's surprised about. Literally nobody's surprised about. It's always a problem. So let's move on over to that. And good morning, Nicole. All right. And I see Lucas is on the YouTube. Hi, Diane. Diane Roshan's on. She's saying hi. Can you see the comments?
Hi, Diane. I don't see her name yet. There it is. Yeah. But hi, Diane. Good to have you with us this morning.
Yeah. So we're just getting started and getting rolling. Okay. You got to tell me now. So part of my little shtick here, and I guess I should have told you this, I wasn't thinking, is that I call it spirit signs and sips. So every morning we've got whatever we're sipping on. Everybody's got to tell me what they're drinking, their morning beverage. So what's everybody drinking this morning? Oh, Reverend Glenda, now are you a coffee or a tea drinker?
In the morning, I'm coffee. In the afternoon, I'm tea.
Okay.
I learned to drink tea in the afternoon from Reverend Frances Smith, who is British, and I just do that in honor of her.
I love that. I love Frances. I love her so much.
She may be on this morning. I'm not sure.
That'd be amazing. It is a little early for our West Coasters, but something tells me they do. I feel like they probably get up early. They probably, well, I've got my new flavor. All right, well, let's try that again. Listen, okay, but here's also the funny part is that Reverend Glenda tends to mess with electronics on accident.
I'm not touching anything. I have myself at arm length from my computer.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with that.
Who knows?
Who knows? The technology is being silly this morning. So welcome, Reverend Glenda. I'm so glad that you agreed to do this with me today because I know your schedule. And so if you want to really quick, just kind of tell people a little about yourself. And then of course I'm going to ask all the questions, but a little about yourself, a little bit about what you're doing these days. And I'd love to hear from you first.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to share your show with you today. Looking forward to it. I have been a spiritualist medium and ordained spiritualist minister now longer than I want to admit, because you might be able to figure out how old I am if I tell you that. But I was ordained as a spiritualist minister, and first had a residence on the home at Camp Chesterfield in 1993. For you that don't know that year, that's before 2000. And since that time, I have continued in various roles on the camp, both administrative and as a medium minister teacher. Today, I still have the home on Camp Chesterfield. I am also living in a home in Fishers, Indiana. And I do think the connection with Fishers, Indiana, and the camp is how Lorenda and I really came to meet each other. However, I think that was really planned by spirit. I don't buy into coincidence. I buy into, I just don't understand the bigger picture of how that happened.
Right.
And I devote most of my time today. I am on the board of Camp Chesterfield. I'm the vice president of the board. I am on the education committee. However, I devote my spiritual work to private clients and also to teaching online, as well as teaching my own classes online, as well as teaching online for Camp Chesterfield, and then serving at the camp when I'm asked to or scheduled to. I would say that's, to start with, that's just plenty to know about me.
That's a lot to know.
Yeah.
And I love that. And, for those of you who missed it, Reverend Glenda is my mentor. You've been my mentor since 2020. Yeah. Since
Going
everything.
into the pandemic, kind of, I think is when we met, maybe online. Yes.
Yeah. Because, I wasn't teaching dance. I didn't have anything
Oh,
going
that's
on.
right. Yes.
And then,
That was a
and then
change in your schedule right then. Yes.
and then also you guys started offering online opportunities.
Yes.
And what's funny is our funny little connection is actually initially my tap company. Funny enough,
Really?
because
Oh, yes.
Laura,
That would be true. I understand what you're saying. Yes.
yeah, and I had the very first time I ever met Laura, it was like the first day of the new year of the company, and I said, okay, let's go around, tell a fun fact about yourself, so we can get to know the quirky side of you. And so we go around, we tell something, and then one of my students says, well, for those of you who don't know, Lorenda's a psychic medium, and she does tarot things. And I was like, listen, we don't need to talk about that here. And then Laura comes up to me, she goes, okay, you want to know something funny? We just moved to Camp Chesterfield. And I said, you want to know something funnier? I've always wanted to go there. And so we created this dialogue about it. And then her wife, Michelle's the one that was like, well, I only told people I was doing psychic work. And she says, well, I said, well, I'm not a medium. She goes, well, what do you think a medium is? I said, well, I don't see the spirit. She's like, that's not what it is. I said, oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. And then, so they directed me. I said, well, I need a mentor. I think it's time for me to have a mentor. That was about a year and a half later. And they're like, you need to go see Reverend Glenda. And here I am. And then,
well, Michelle, her partner, had been with me and with another medium also for quite a few years by that time. I've always enjoyed working with Reverend Michelle. Yes.
Yeah, I love Laura and Michelle are amazing. Love them. So, all right. Well, let me ask you this. What first drew you to doing this work, to do mediumship?
Oh, I had no intention of doing it. It was a coincidence, as I said. Spirit knew about it. I didn't yet. I had always had a interest in what I will call the metaphysics of life. I had certainly had readings. I'd never been to Camp Chesterfield, didn't even know it existed. but I was a student of metaphysics and mediumship, but never in my fondest thoughts did I think I could do this. And who knew? Who knew? Spirit knew, you know.
And here we are.
But
Yes.
there were this is many years ago, probably around late 1980s. I was a friend of mine, a gentleman I was dating, and another couple. We had this Sunday afternoon thing that we did. There was a book out at the time called The Back Roads of Indiana.
Mhm.
And it is day trips to different interesting places in Indiana. And so that day we chose the page about Camp Chesterfield. We didn't choose it, it chose us. We would always reach in and just see where the book opened. That's where the book opened. That's where we went. I guess I would say I never left.
You didn't.
That was my introduction. I started taking classes there, had a reading there, and I thought, great, a place to have readings, and I can take some fun classes. At the time, I was a single parent of 2 children. When they're with their father, I can come to camp. And that's what I did.
Wow.
One day after I had been doing that for a couple of years, there was a lady, Reverend Evelyn Carr, now in spirit, who I considered my medium. So I always had my readings with her. She was a great tarot reader. And this one day I'm sitting on her glassed-in porch having a reading, and she says, "So when are you going to start taking development classes?" And I said, "I've told you before, Evelyn, I can't do this. I can't do this." She says, "Uh-huh." And she says, "Why else aren't you taking development classes?" "Well, I'm a single parent, and I run 2 businesses in Indianapolis, and I just really don't have the time to do that." She says, "You have the time to be up here every other weekend." She was a very direct lady.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, that's true, but I just really can't do this." And she says, "No, tell me the real reason that you're not taking development classes." And out of my mouth came, the first time I understood I had the gift of inspirational speaking.
Yeah.
Out of my mouth, totally bypassing my brain, came the answer, because I know if I do take development classes, my life will never be the same. She says, "Okay, then we're going to get started." And she said, "Sit right here." She went inside. She came out, and across the street, there was a lady standing on her front porch, Reverend Louise Irvine, waving at us. And she literally took me by the hand, Reverend Carr did, walked me across the street, put my hand in Reverend Louise's hand, and said, "Reverend Louise, this is your new student." And I said, "Oh, there's been a mistake." I said, "I can't do this. And I would be a beginner. And I know, Reverend Louise, you only take advanced students." She said, "Classes at 7:00 on Wednesday evening, be here." "Yes, ma'am."
Yes, ma'am.
And so I was there, and she's now in spirit, but it is still 20. That was many years later. And I sat with her every week of the year for over 20 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
But I can't do this.
But I can't do this. Me with I'm not a medium. What are you talking about?
That's right.
Well, that disembodied voice in my head that comes through for the tarot cards, that's not mediumship. It's fine. No, I get it.
Yes, It is one of the truest types of mediumship that there is,
Right.
because spirit is speaking directly. It's bypassing your mind.
Right. Right. Wow. I love that. I love that the person that got you into this shares the same last name as I do. Because I love synchronicities. And then what's interesting too is, like, there have been times I never met Reverend Louise. I only know what, occasionally you've said, okay, and this is what Reverend Louise taught us, and this is something that you would say, but really, I don't know anything about her. But I remember in trance class one time, I'm in your seance room, and I felt her sit down next to me. And that was in my early days of feeling people. And
When she sees that there is someone that she feels like she can mentor and help and walk with, she makes herself known.
yeah,
She makes herself known.
I felt pretty special having her come in and just sit down, and it was almost like a little pat on the knee, like, it's okay, you've got this, you can do this.
And see, that was one of the things she would do with students when she was in the physical with us. If she came by, she might pat your knee. And I know you didn't know that, but she might pat your knee, and that meant, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, I love that. And she's such a wonderful energy. Sometimes it's so funny. I do talk a lot about our spirit guides and Dr. Mike, and I've even brought Dr. Buchanan up before, because Dr. Buchanan will and has shown up and like not scolded me, but kind of put me in check on some things that I need to do. And I'm
Yes, he will truly say some things occasionally.
like, listen, how about you just go back to Reverend Glenda and you let me be over here? You let me be in my little happy place of not doing what I'm supposed to do right now, sir. But I'll take it under advisement. So
yes, he did once tell me, you just broke a rule that I gave you about doing seance. So I think I'll leave and you can just do this on your own today.
yeah,
Not a possibility. Not a possibility. So I had to cancel that seance.
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah. I learned that lesson real quick.
Real quick.
Real quick.
So, well, now let's talk about, seance. So you are both more, clairvoyant. You also do trance, and you're my trance mediumship mentor. Like, you're the only person I've ever. No, that's not true. I've worked with I took one other class with Eileen Davies out in the UK. Doesn't even compare to what you've got going on in your classes. And so I know you have mentioned to me, Reverend Louise said, well, what comes more natural to you? So can you talk about that? Like your feeling of the difference between mental mediumship versus, trance mediumship, and where you've kind of fallen there?
I would love to. I will start just briefly and say the thought of being a trance medium never occurred to me. Mediumship was like, can't do it. Trance medium? So that first Wednesday night that I was sitting with Reverend Louise, there were about 12 other students there, and she went around the room and she would ask each one of them, which did they want to do that night, clairvoyance or trance? I was next to the last in the circle where she had started. And I thought, oh boy, have I got myself into a mess this time, because I can't do either one. So she gets to me and she says, I will never forget the exact words of this question. Which is more natural to you, clairvoyance or trance? In my head, I'm thinking, neither one. And out of my mouth came trance. Who said that? I don't know. That couldn't have been Glenda. And she said, okay, then we'll do trance tonight. I thought, oh, yeah, sure, that's going to happen. And she comes over, she sits down in front of me, she puts her hands on my knees, and she says, who would you like to have talk through you? Well, from all the classes I'd taken, I understood I had guides, and I really liked Shaka, my protector. And I said, and I had another protector I worked with named White Wind. And for some reason, I chose White Wind. And so I said, what do I do? She says, close your eyes. And okay, I can do that. And she then says, now, when I see White Wind there, I'll start talking to him. And I felt clear through me this tingling, this electricity happening as he moved in. She forgot to tell me that the reason that he was moving in was to use my vocal cords. Spirit doesn't have a voice, you know. They don't have a body. We don't have a vocal cord somewhere in spirit. And so one of the reasons that they do trance with us is to use our vocal cords. But she forgot to mention that. This is my first class, you know.
Right.
And so when he started trying to talk back to her, I just choked and coughed and choked and coughed and choked and coughed. And she says, White Wind, you can go ahead and step aside. But when she's back here next Wednesday, I will have explained to her she has to let you talk. And in my head, as I was coming back and she's explaining that to me, I said, well, we'll see. I didn't say it out loud. I said in my head, well, we'll see if I'm here next Wednesday or not. 20 years later, I was still there. But the very next week, when I understood just talk, even if you think it's you, just talk, I realized I didn't understand what I was saying, but White Wind was talking. And I've come to understand, yes, I can do clairvoyance. I can work with spirit art. I enjoy all of those type of activities. But in my heart, in who I am, my mediumship is based in inspirational speaking and trance. There's a slight difference between those two, but I do most of my work working with inspirational speaking. Love trance. Have had some wonderful experiences with trance. Haven't done a private trance for anybody since yesterday. But other than that, today's another day. Does that answer it kind of take you where you wanted me to go, Lorenda?
Listen, we're on this ride for fun. Like,
okay.
Wherever the train's driving, we're going to at this point, I feel like Dr. Mike and Dr. Buchanan are like, let's do this. All right.
That's right.
Fun. This is fun. Let's see what they say next.
Let's find out what they want to say.
Yeah. So now, okay. So what would you say is maybe one of your most profound experiences as far as doing trance? I know you've told us as students a number of your stories, but what would you say would be in trance mediumship would be a really memorable experience for you?
I probably, I do trance most weeks, either in seance or private sessions with folks. I always find that doing trance on the phone seems a bit strange to me. Not that anything else I do is strange, but a bit strange to me. I do it on Zoom, prefer to do it in person. And one of the reasons I prefer to do trance in person, I believe spirit can take on their own identity easier when the vibration is there with the person they want to talk to. It's not that it can't be done with electronics, but I do find that spirit themselves prefer and react a bit differently vibrationally when they're speaking to the person across the room or next to you versus on Zoom or on the phone. It works, but it just doesn't quite feel the same. Vibration is different.
Well, yeah.
When I think of what is something memorable with trance, I have to admit trance is, people have the concept that when you're in trance you don't hear anything.
Oh yeah, not true.
And that is not exactly how it works. It's the same as when you're having a dream, which is another altered state that is very similar to trance. You may be very active in the dream and you may hear it. And when you wake up, you don't remember anything except you had a dream and maybe a sentence or two. That's exactly how trance works. If I'm in trance, I hear what's going on. It's just that I don't know it when I come back.
Right.
It doesn't stay. It's left in that. And I so appreciate that because I believe one of the beauties of trance is the confidentiality that the recipient, the client, can have in their direct communication with spirit, whether it's a loved one or a guide. Um, it takes if I'm all the way out in trance, it takes the element of Glenda's mind out of what is happening. And that is probably what I love most about trance is being able to give clients the experience of their own direct communication with their loved ones or with their guides.
Right.
And being the type of person I am, it's kind of a time I can just rest. You know, I'm really not mentally involved. It's just my vocal cords. Yes, I can do this, Um, inspirational speaking is slightly different because it's a different blend between the medium's mind and spirit, and you would have the essence of everything coming from Glenda, and it's really bypassing my mind, and I'm speaking like when I said, what seems more natural, and out of my mouth came the word trance, not
Right.
planned by me, not me saying it. That's inspirational speaking.
Yeah. I will say I will never forget the first time I was in your class. I'd been in your development class for over a year. And
Mm-hmm.
at one point we were doing, I think we had a choice, like inspirational speaking or I can't remember what the exercise was, but we were taking turns. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, my voice changes. I start speaking in an accent. At this point, I have not met with you. I knew the rules. Before you can do trance, you have to meet with me in person.
Right.
Understand? Plus, I had no interest in doing trance. I had not even thought about it because I can't do that.
I
So,
know.
and then that spirit came in, and I felt like it was channeled. It was channeled. It wasn't. Now that I know the difference, it was not trance. There was no transfiguration, but I did have some movement there, and my voice completely changed. I could not tell you what I said. It was truly coming in and funneling out.
Wow.
And that's when I text you afterwards. I'm like, okay, well, I feel like now we're at a new level.
You were already there. They were just waiting for you to have the opportunity to do that.
I know. And so I think within a week I was in your seance room and we were doing the thing.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
but it was such I find it fascinating because every once in a while I will get out of the way because I feel like mental mediumship, I tend to overthink. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's some interpretation that sometimes has to happen. Like, well, I see a rose, and in my mind, a rose means blah 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 blah. So either I'm supposed to say I see a rose, and that makes sense to you, or the name Rose. So there's a lot of unknown factors sometimes that come in with that.
Absolutely.
Where if I'm just like, and your turn, I'll get out of the way. It's so much easier. It's so
Isn't
easier.
it?
But then when I do. So when I get on platform at Camp Chesterfield, though, I know I can't do that. So I have to really click in and really practice my click. It's a really good exercise for me to just say, nope, you don't get to step in. You got it. I'm truly the medium today. So it's interesting.
One of the things, as you know, Lorenda, that I so totally believe in and I so totally teach in all aspects of what I do is that the medium is always in control.
Yes, always.
And that people say, oh, no, that's not how it works for me. Well, then we need to work on getting it so it does work that way for you. Because being able to control how you work not control what's said. I don't mean that kind of control,
Right.
but how you work has a great deal to do with respecting and learning to work as a team with your guides. And that allows the medium to let go and know that there's a framework around them of spirit that is going to move forward in the way the medium chooses to present. And it isn't allowing spirit to make those decisions. It is allowing spirit to work with us with their expertise and help guide us in, it's like when Dr. Buchanan, anyone that's around me gets to know Dr. Buchanan. When Dr. Buchanan said to me many, many years ago, and maybe the third seance I did, you just broke one of the rules, Glenda. And so I'm stepping out for the day. You go ahead and do this by yourself. He has the right to do that. And I learned very quickly, he's giving me this information for the right reason, and that's to help me. And so it is learning to work with the control, with your own control. You're in control of the mediumship, but it's always your free will to move forward in the way you want to move. It isn't that you're tied into, you have to do it a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have found, especially since working with you and understanding and getting to know my guides in a deeper way, the mediumship, no matter what way it's coming through, what the spirit communication, no matter what way it's coming through, I depend on my guides now. Not depend like codependent in a negative way, but we are truly a team.
Yes.
Like if they want to be like, oh, you think you can do this on your own? And go, but
you're right. It isn't a codependence.
No.
It is truly working as a team and understanding the part they can make so much easier for us if we just allow it to happen that way.
Right. Well, and one of the concerns that I remember having when I expressed to you when we were first doing trance, I said, what if I get to a point where I start reading, not just, or bringing in not just guides, but loved ones. And I bring through someone that that person does not want to hear from. Or what if I bring something through from some other realm that I don't, that there was a fear around it, which is pretty common. It's a pretty common fear.
It's good to ask those questions.
And you had said, but Lily and Dr. Mike won't let that happen.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, good point. Because Lily, how I picture Lily during any kind of reading situation is she's got her clipboard and she's like, you over there, you're not coming in, get out. You're next, you're up. And then you come on over here, you're my cue. Like I feel, and she adjusts my vibration to be able to accept and receive information. And we truly are doing this work, a team. And I love it. I love that I've gotten to know them in that way. And then also a team just in my everyday life, learning how to utilize my spirit team to just function and get the most out of Lorenda Carr life.
I often, when I have a new client or student that wants to tell me they don't work with spirit guides, that doesn't happen more than, every time I meet with a new student. And the reality is that might not be how they perceive it. They may not have names for them, but spirit is working with them.
Right.
The mind to mind vibration and communication that goes on between spirit and the medium is there. And so it's going on. It's learning how to harness that and make it so you can work with it. I often tell students the difference between being able to say that you are a student medium and that you are a professional medium is at 9 o'clock in the morning, I have a trance reading scheduled, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, it has to happen then. or I have a clairvoyant reading scheduled at 3 o'clock. And at 3 o'clock, I can stop and I can start to tune in and work clairvoyantly for that person. Now, as a student, it's more likely that you can do the same things, but you can't do it on cue. You haven't learned how yet to control your mediumship. And so, and part of a main part of controlling your mediumship is learning how to interact with your guides.
Yeah.
And how they're going to turn the vibrations on so that all this is going to happen the way you desire for it to. The concept of working with guides is always so very interesting. And I often try to explain it to somebody who has now accepted that they have guides. They may or may not want to call them by name. And I try to put that in the perspective of, if you go to a cocktail party and you meet several people there that evening, maybe you meet 2 or 3 that you particularly enjoyed meeting. You're only going to get to know them on a certain level. You know, you're going to know their name, maybe not. You're going to kind of know something about them, maybe not. You're not going to get to know them as a group. It's when you get to work with them or know them or have lunch with them individually, the people from the party, then you're going to start to get to know them at a different level. And I look at it being the same way with spirit guides. You're kind of meeting them, you get to know them, maybe you know their name, maybe you don't. The reason for knowing someone's name is because you can call them by name and you start to develop a personal relationship with them. That's the reason one starts to understand how they have guides and what they can do. And I'll say a really important part is that when you leave here today, I'm doing a private session with someone. When you leave here today, I want you to go home and put a shelf up in your office. And if I ever come over to your home, I'm going to test with my glove and make sure there's dust on that shelf. Because, you see, I don't want you letting your guides set up on that shelf. If you let them set up on the shelf and only ask them to come down and work with you when you're doing your spiritual work, you're missing the best part. Living your life in a way that spirit and your own spiritual guidance team is working with you every day in your personal life is wonderful. Last evening, I had just gotten finished with a reading, and I was thinking about a friend of mine, and I thought in my mind, oh, I wonder how his day went today. And my phone rings, and it's him. And he says to me, Glenda, I don't know how that happened. I didn't call you. I said, I'm sorry. I was just thinking about it. Dr. Buchanan or Poppy must have called you.
Right.
Because I didn't even have the phone in my hand. It is learning to work with the magic of spirit within your own life.
And that's what I love about this journey. And that's the key word, magic. It should always be magical. It should never be scary or pressure. Like it should be magical. And one of the things that spirit showed me, and I don't know if I told you this or not. I was doing a meditation and I had asked spirit about their perspective on something. And they showed me how we all come in together and how they wanted me to understand how we work and function outside of just mediumship. That they said, okay, so we've got your master teacher up here who's like the disembodied Peanuts voice. Wah, 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 wah. Okay. And then each of us, like we're all a spirit team, like including myself on the other side, we're a spirit team. And then we all draw straws. Who's got what job? Who's up next to learn? Who needs to learn how to be a protector? You, excellent. You need to be you need to work on frequencies. Cool. You can be, I drew the short straw. I'm going in. I get to incarnate. That we are like a classroom project. And that really, and each of us as a classroom project, not only am I learning and utilizing them, they are learning and utilizing my experiences. And that changed my perspective on everything from mediumship to just functioning in the world and being able to utilize my team as we are a unit. We're a classroom project. And it really changed my perspective on literally just everything in between here, the mundane and the magical.
Yes.
You know,
and who wouldn't want to live in a more magical existence rather than the other? I don't have a good word for it. None of the words I thought of were what I wanted to use.
right.
But why wouldn't you want to be able to have that joy of the magic in your life?
Right. Now, one thing that they did show me also, and they said, yeah, well, we're lucky that you're plugged in, because imagine the spirit team over there. The guy that drew the short straw said, I have an idea for all of you to learn. I'm going to go in. I'm going to believe in absolutely nothing. And you get to fly, like, I'm going to fly blind, and you all get to guide me while I don't believe in you. The whole 90 years. You want to go? Let's do it.
I have at times, and it's hard not, and sometimes I think I have laughed, is someone will be telling me how they don't believe in spirit guides. They are a working medium. They don't need them, blah, 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 the whole thing, nothing I haven't heard before.
Right.
And I sit and listen, and all the time I see, and when I say see, I don't mean I necessarily see it out here. Most mediums don't see a lot out here, and they don't hear a lot out here. It's in our minds that we see and hear it. Sometimes we get the joy of seeing it out here, but not all the time.
Right.
And this person is going on about how, that is just a concept that people use. There really aren't spirit guides. There aren't all this happening. And I see their spirit guides up here, but I see them going, see what we mean? He's just not paying attention to us. He doesn't even want to let us talk to him or help him. We do, but he takes all the credit for it all the time. And then I love it when one of them will say, let me tell you what happened just yesterday, blah, 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 whatever they say. And I say to them, do you remember yesterday when you were doing such and such and this happened? Well, how'd you know that?
Know that?
Well, yes, I do. I said, oh, that was your joy guide that you don't believe in telling me about that. And is at least, even if they don't want to listen, it at least plants a seed. And there comes a point in time, perhaps, sometimes not, but perhaps down the journey where they click into understanding maybe there is something to this.
There might be something to this.
Maybe so.
As Daryl Shun says, there might be something to this.
There might be. There might be.
So now, how do you? So I find it's more difficult to have those conversations with people who were born with the ability to physically see spirit, because they're either afraid because they were children when they started seeing spirits, or they don't understand, or everything. They just don't quite understand why they're there or who that is. They just see them. And do you find it's harder to get people like that to step into getting to know their guides and getting to, like if somebody comes to you and says, well, I see spirits and I already get messages, I don't need guides. So do you find that they're harder to work with, or I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I'm about to answer my own question. I feel like you snap people in shape pretty quick, but like how?
Well, what's interesting to me about that, um, as I was it for 20 years, basically every Saturday in class with Reverend Louise, there was a group of about 4 other people that were there for that same 20 years. And there were many other, she always had a full room, but there were the group, our little core, that was always there with her to study and learn. And one of the mediums, now a certified medium and minister on the grounds of Camp Chesterfield, moved on to Camp Chesterfield just a short period of time after I did. I have total respect for his mediumship. We grew as students together in those classes. We understand to a certain extent each other's mediumship. Most of us come with a gift that is stronger than the other gifts. My strength came with what one would call intuitive mediumship, which is kind of normal,
Right.
and often is helpful as far as being a trance medium. I would say class after class to Reverend Louise, I don't see and hear anything. And she would say, if you keep saying that, you're never going to see or hear anything. Duh, I came to understand that was true. And there was this other gentleman in the class who said, I wish I was intuitive. I had intuitive mediumship. I see everything. He said, every dead person that's around me, I see them. Now, he happens to also work in the medical community. So he's around hospitals, he's around other places that people have um, have made their transition. And I one day said to Reverend Louise, I just want to be able to see like he does. And she says, no, you don't.
Right.
She said, no, you don't. She says, what you're not understanding is just because he can see doesn't mean he gets any messages. He can describe that spirit. He easily has access to what they look like, but unless they're putting flip cards up telling him what he needs to know, he's not necessarily knowing anything. It's very hard for him.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, we work with him on his knowing, his building on the strength of his seeing, but has to move into the other. And with
Right.
me, we build on the strength of my intuitive mediumship, and I have to move into the other. She says, so stop complaining. And she said, work with what you've got. Don't try to work with what you don't have.
Right.
And she says, as you do that, you will expand those other gifts and realize that you are seeing or hearing. And she said, in fact, you already are. You're just expecting it to be outside of your head. Yours is always inside. I said, well, of course I see and hear things there. She said, duh. Maybe only 5% of mediums truly see and hear everything outside as if they're sitting across. It's learning to work with thought vibration.
So now, how, as a mentor and teacher, would going back to rule number 1, the medium's always in control. How do you teach that person? Because I've talked to people who are like, I'm freaked out. I see them. I've actually met a number of people like I see them and I've always seen them, but it freaks them out. They don't know how to make it stop. So how do you teach them how to have that control? Or do you just tell, well, that's a cool gift, deal with it? Like,
well, until they're ready to deal with it, that's basically what I do.
Okay.
But if they're ready to deal with it, it's the same whether you're working with intuitive, visual, auditory. you start the same place. Let's get to know your guides.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That is, and well, I don't work with guides. Who's that little one that little spirit you're seeing over there in the corner that looks like such and such and such and such? And they say, well, that spirit's around all the time. I don't pay attention to him. That is your joy guide.
Joy guide. Right.
So let us start inviting that joy guide in. Let us start with the exercises to communicate in different ways with that. And as you do, that guide can then help you with your clairaudience, hearing, and also can work with you with your intuitive knowing. It's always going back wherever the person. I have a little sign that's up in my seance room that says, come just as you are. And that sign that says, come just as you are, it means in total who you are, but it also means wherever your mediumship is, come just as you are. And that's where we'll start. And that's how we will move in, and you will start to gain the control. Because I can't imagine, if you don't have control and you're seeing spirit all around you, that there isn't a bit of, oh, I just don't want any of this to happen. Let's try to block all of it, rather than
Right.
how does one step into it. My son, who is now in his late 40s, and when I was a single parent at home and I started going to Camp Chesterfield, he says, make sure you never talk about Camp Chesterfield in front of any of my friends. I don't want them to know about this. I said, and he says, don't ever talk to me about it either. I said, I'll respect that. And I didn't. I did not talk about it to him or in front of him. One day when he was about a junior in high school, I had just gotten home from a day at Camp Chesterfield, and he said, so what did you do today? I said, oh, I'm not allowed to talk to you about that. No. You're trying to trick me. He said, no. I said, you really want to know what I did at Camp Spooky today? Because that's what I call Camp Chesterfield, is Camp Spooky. You really want to know what I did at Camp Spooky today? He said, yes. What did you do? I said, I talked to dead people.
Yeah.
And I saw dead people. It was a really good day. And
It's
he
always
says,
a good day.
what do you mean? He says, like when you're walking down a hall and you see the spirit out the side of your eyes. He says, is that what you do? I said, trying not to go, is that happening to you? Trying to just be nonchalant about it. I said, well, I work with that. I said, do you sometimes? He says, why do you think I sleep with all the lights on in my room? It's so I can't see them as easy.
Interesting.
And I realized my son was a natural medium, seeing spirit the way I was trying really hard to learn to see it.
Right. That's funny.
The first time I was going to do trance on the platform at Camp Chesterfield, I invited he and then it was his fiance at the time, now his wife, to come to the chapel service where I would be demonstrating, because this is a big deal in my life to be doing this on the platform the first time at Camp Chesterfield. And he said, I can't possibly come. He'd always refused to go to Camp Chesterfield with me. And his wife says, well, I'll come. I mean, his fiance says, I'll come. And I said, well, I have maybe that's a little bit too much. Why don't you just come and see me work the platform sometime first? Because seeing your mother go into trance might be a little bit for the first time. And I came to understand the issue I had been trying to help people with was actually what was happening with my own family, with my own son. Now, to this day, he probably would not deny that happened anymore, but he would still deny that he has any mediumship ability.
Mediumship gifts. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Wow.
So, it is always starting where you are, accepting where you are,
Yeah.
and then learning how to control it.
Right.
And
Right.
that starts to move you in. It does take I believe it takes working with a medium who can span those gifts and help you. For example, the person that says, I don't work with guides and I see spirit everywhere, to have them understand, well, you can see that I'm actually not seeing it in the physical. I'm actually seeing it up here, but I still see that guide sitting there feeling very ignored. And when they realize, oh, okay, but I don't think, they will start as they want to find the control. They will start allowing you to help them do that. Can't force it on anybody.
No. And that's the key. That's what I found, because I have run into people along the way that have reached out to me to help them or to get them to move into this. And they like, well, you're going to have to learn. If you want to work in the capacity I know how to work, that's something you're going to have to do, is understand like your guides and learn how to utilize your team and learn how to control it. But I think people just get kind of afraid. Now, somebody in TikTok did ask if you
Okay.
could explain, if you could talk about the different guides, like the team, like your joy guide specifically is what Reggie was asking about. But if you could kind of explain the guides.
I'm going to start by saying, just as a culture that I've grown up in my mediumship and my spiritualism in, I tend to use the terms, the semantics of the spiritualist understanding.
Right.
And so sometimes we have to talk about just the semantics of when somebody says this, oh, I use this term, I'll try to use your term when I'm talking with you. Because really what I'm talking about is spirit guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And spirit guidance, then trying to find out a way to put it in a place that I can access it,
Mm-hmm.
and that I can learn to work with spirit so that I can more accurately and more consistently, and when I'm scheduled to, be able to bring forth that which is desired. And the term, I would believe anyone that does this work would say, yes, they know that there's spiritual guidance around them. They know they feel things, or but they haven't been given the opportunity to understand how to frame that and harness it. And so I work with, and this comes from the background of, shall we say, growing up as a spiritual. I didn't grow up as a spiritualist until I was about 40 years old. Then I started growing up as a spiritualist. But the understanding that there are certain functions that different spirits, a single spirit is not doing everything all the time, that different spirits are stepping in order to help you with various parts of what you're doing. And for us as a spiritualist, we look at what we call an inner band of guides, a set of 5 that are with us all the time to help with each with their own function with us. And then there may be other guides that we consider outer band guides that come and go, maybe frequently, maybe just occasionally, maybe only once. I think of it as the guides that are part of the inner band. I think of them as having asked for consulting services from other spirits, and they're bringing them in closer to me to help with something very particular. Well, so the 5, very shortly, are the joy guide, the philosopher, the alchemist, the protector, and then the master guide. The first 4 are working with you only. You are enough for them to handle in this lifetime. And the master is working with thousands of people, but bringing in specific spiritual understandings, helping to raise your consciousness and work with you, understanding perhaps natural law or universal law. Then the joy guide is there. If you're not working as a medium, they're still there. Everyone has a joy guide. In our belief system, everyone has a joy guide. Think of them as the spirit who is being brought to you through the law of vibration that is closest to your child within. It's not part of you, but your child within vibration is attracting that joy guide's vibration to you. And so they may be there always to help bring joy and lightness into your life. If you start working in spiritual life in some way, they often are the one who will step up and say, I'll be the gatekeeper. I'll help work with the other spirits that want to come in. And then the philosopher, sometimes called the doctor teacher, that's very old spiritualism terminology. I work with the term philosopher because I believe they are working with our life philosophy, in our spiritual life, in our day-to-day life, in our understanding ethical behavior, in understanding natural law. I kind of think of them as the chairman of the board of all of my guides. And then there is a protector, which that pretty well says it. This is a spirit who walks with you in a very protective way, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and helps with guiding you in that way. But they cannot interfere with something that you set in motion through your free will and through your personal responsibility. They can go, oh, I can't believe she's doing that. But they have to allow you to have that experience.
Right.
Then the 4th is the alchemist, the one most people, healers often know this guide the most. But other than that, most people, this is the one that they don't get to know as quickly. And that is the spirit that is working with your etheric body, that is helping to bring about health and wellness in your body, is working with stabilizing vibration, is working with assisting with the aura of your body. Mm-hmm. And there is much that can be done. I never, I won't say never, because I'm sure I have. I really like for anyone starting to work with trance to also start working with their alchemist, because in that way they are helping to replenish the vibration that they are using. And certainly if it's someone that steps into physical mediumship, then they better have a really tight relationship with their alchemist. That's probably more than you wanted, but maybe that gives an overview for that.
Yeah, I've done entire shows like my Spirit Sides and Steps where we talk about guides and their roles and how imperative they are to the practice. If you're and how you can again utilize them in the mundane way, just making your way through life, and how do you use them, utilize or work with them to get the most.
Access their guidance. It's always our free will and our personal responsibility what we do with that guidance. Correct. But the reality is the access is there for us to help us make perhaps better decisions than we would make on our own. A different perspective, shall we say. Yes.
Right. Reggie says, thank you, Reverend Glenda.
You're very welcome. Where are you coming to us from, Reggie?
see, Reggie, I think, is in Georgia, maybe. Am I making?
Georgia. Okay.
Reggie's he's one of my friends. He actually teaches classes as well. And let's see, and they're also on TikTok. They're all saying, "Thank you. This is great stuff." They're loving it. But North Carolina. I was totally
North
wrong.
Carolina. Okay. Well, I lived in the mountains of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the mountains of North Carolina for about 6 years. Came back here to Indiana in 2019. Was there from 2013. I lived up in the Cashiers Sapphire Valley area. So nice to meet another person that enjoys North Carolina. I'm going back for a visit late this summer. Time hasn't been set up, but yeah, I can't wait. The mountains are calling me.
Woo! The mountains don't call me. Now the ocean calls me. I would say
The ocean calls me at least twice a year.
right. That's not true. I think as I get older, I have a much deeper appreciation for the vibration and the beauty and the majesty of the mountains. It makes me.
I have a difficult time I lived in the Rocky Mountains for about 5 years, and I had a difficult time with living in that type of mountain vibration.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very masculine vibration. It's a much more direct vibration. The granite there is part of that. The Blue Ridge Mountains, because they are still granite mountains, they are not as high altitude, and they also are totally covered in vegetation. It is a temperate rainforest in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. So it has very different vibration and is part of the reason for the heavy Native American influence that has always been in those mountains.
Yeah. So, well, this actually brings me to one of my questions that I had for you. Someone who's traveled nationally as well as internationally, like you've been all over the place doing mediumship. Do you notice different spiritual vibrations or energies, or even needs across different regions or cultures? Like, what have you noticed through your travels that, as a medium and working?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I wish as I was doing it, I would have paid more attention. I have the first time that, shall I say, I went out on the road as a medium was about, I can tell you, I was scheduled to be in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the weekend that Katrina hit.
Oh.
And the person that I was being hosted by a spiritualist church in Baton Rouge.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady that was the pastor of that church, Reverend Francis Doty, called and said, "Glenda, I think we better put it off just a bit. We seem to have a hurricane that's pretty heavy coming in." So I did not go. I did go a month later. And one could not ignore the vibration at that time. That was my first trip to Louisiana, period. I'd never been in Louisiana vibration. It was not at all like regular Louisiana vibration. So I had to pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
We did a lot more work with than I had intended to do with healing that particular trip. Yeah. My normal when I would go out to do a week somewhere would be doing readings during the day and into the evening, usually during the week, teaching a couple development classes, and usually doing a couple seances. That was my norm of when I would go out on the, shall we say, on the road to do mediumship. People were not able that time to focus their minds. The vibration of what had happened, and those people in Baton Rouge had absorbed what came from New Orleans. And they had 800,000 people evacuate to Baton Rouge within a week's period of time. To experience that vibration, I had the opportunity the lady I was staying with, her name is Ishwari, and she is now a Hindu Swami. I'm not quite sure where she's living in the world these days, but she was often moved by spirit ahead of national disasters. And she had been asked by spirit to move from New York. She was in New York during 9/11. She had been moved there from another place in New England. And then she was moved to Baton Rouge about a year and a half before Katrina happened. And she took on a role of, I learned so much from that lady. I learned about crystal labyrinths. She's the person that first introduced me to a labyrinth. She also had been to Japan to work with the Japanese doctor, whose name's escaping me right now, that worked with water vibration and being able to put thought vibration into water and then drink the water and heal the water. She was one of 24 people in the United States that was certified by him to do that. And so we worked on Lake Pontchartrain every day that I was there, trying to transform that water and what had happened to it in Katrina. Most of those, and she's also a Reiki master teacher, and we worked with different parts of the land there during that week, as far as working with healing with Reiki with the land and the people in that area. One of the things I learned is that every place you go, if you will be open to it, you will always learn more than you can possibly give. When I lived in Colorado, that was certainly true. When I would work in Baton Rouge, I couldn't wait to get there to figure out what I was going to learn while I was doing my readings and seance. And you asked me earlier, were there specific times with trance that I had something occur that was memorable?
Yes.
And one of those times was in a seance in Baton Rouge. No, actually, this was a seance in Colorado. And there was a lady there in the seance. And what I remember, oftentimes when I'm saying something that happened in a seance, I'm saying it from what people told me happened. Right. I wasn't there, shall we say, to experience it firsthand, but I can often then correlate with how I was feeling differently. And in this situation, I do try on seance sitting in front of a table. Spirit will often stand me up and walk me in the room. And in this situation, I felt this lady's husband from spirit come in. One of my rules with seance is the spirit must identify themselves. No one is allowed to speak through me unless they identify themselves.
That's one thing I did learn from you as well. And
I mean, it's important. It's like, would you leave the front door unlocked all day and all night and let anybody come in that wanted to? No.
No.
I'm going to know who that is, or Poppy is, if I'm all the way out for several times. And her husband came in. I do remember feeling him settling over me and settling much deeper into me than spirit normally does physically. Okay. And they stood me up and walked me over to her, and I took her hand and kind of bent down and was talking to her. What I remember of that is I could hardly pick my legs up. I had to shuffle there. I could not, I felt I was struggling to move. And when I went to raise up, I had trouble getting back up after the Spirit had spoken through me. And I was really feeling weighted down and I could hardly move my legs. When I got back to the chair and sat down and he said his goodbyes and I came back in, she started talking to me, the recipient. She said, "This is definitely my husband. You walk just like him." And I could see his hands holding my hands. It wasn't your hands. And she came to tell me that he had severe Parkinson's and that he was physically being able to show his body through mine as a form of physical mediumship, kind of just past transfiguration and into some ectoplasm being used to change my hand shapes, that sort of thing. I remember sitting down, glad to know why I was having so much trouble walking, but also thinking, isn't that wonderful that she could experience her husband and feel like he was holding her hand and talking to her direct?
Which goes back to, why do we do mediumship? To begin.
Exactly.
It's not for the dog and pony show. It's not to look at me, see what I can do. But what a healing experience for that woman. I mean,
it was. I mean, it totally was.
Yeah.
And I have a student who may be on here this morning. I'm not sure because I'm not seeing, I'm not trying to see who all's on here on the
right.
Oftentimes after I have a student who has worked the platform the first time at Camp Chesterfield, the next day I'll ask them, tell me what you learned. I'm not really interested at that point in critiquing. We'll do that as we go along. But tell me what you learned from that experience. And she's a very articulate lady. And she said, I learned it is, you can imagine she was very nervous going to be up there. It was a student service of her peers, be up there for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I learned that is just silly to be nervous about doing this.
Right.
She said, I've always gotten nervous because, I hope I'm right. I don't want to make mistakes. I want to make sure I'm authentic. All the things that we really, if we want to serve people, that's what we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything holds us back, it is trying to overanalyze so we don't do those things.
Right.
But she said, and there's still a part of me that knows I'm there to serve the people that are in that audience or congregation. But she says, what I learned was that the spirits were so excited about the fact I was going to let them speak through me and do this. She says, I never truly understood that what I was doing was serving spirit as well as.
Yep.
And that has, since the day she said that has stuck with me every time I work. I think about her saying, you are serving the spirits as much or more than you are serving the person that they are reaching out to.
Right.
And that comes in for me to say that at this time, because that's exactly how I felt about that situation when the husband had come through and was able to go past transfiguration, was able to move me and be able to show himself. I don't believe that he was truly moving away from me. He was transfiguring and being able to manifest himself within me. And think of how he felt when he could interact with his wife in that way.
Right.
And so I think as mediums, and as the lady I was talking about, that's my student, she said, when she said, I never again can look at doing this work the same, because I really now understand I have no right to be afraid. All I'm doing is speaking for these people. If I'll let it happen, I'm serving them. And if we can learn to think of our work in that way, it will really help us to expand what we're doing.
It does. And it's a very, I find that mediumship, it's growing up, I watch other mediums. I'm like, ooh, I want to be famous, because I'm a big Leo energy. I've always, that's my goal in my life, is to be famous, to be seen. But in this work, it has humbled me so much, to a point where I feel nothing but gratitude every time I'm able to connect. And that is it's a very different feeling than growing up and navigating the world, right? But
Yes,
it's a very humbling experience,
it
and
always is.
but
It
it's also
always is.
exciting. It's still exciting. So because I'm first time I ever did platform in front of a whole audience was last year, Super Gala. That's the first time I ever stepped on stage.
If you can't run with the big dogs, stay on the porch,
Right. But I remember being so just humbled in a good way, and so grateful, because the messages that were coming in, the vibration, working with other people, like, because I was on platform with some fantastic mediums, just the feeling, and just feeling so humbled and grateful that spirit could work, that spirit was like saying what they needed to say, and getting the messages, and the healing is just, that to me is the best part. It's the
Well,
best.
it is. Once you let go of the fear, and I know a Leo doesn't have much fear, but once you let go of the mentalness of it
Mhm.
and allow it to flow, that is when spirit can do things that are humbling, totally humbling.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons you and I both enjoy trance so much,
Mhm.
is we can totally let go
Yeah.
and allow spirit to just do their thing,
Do their work.
because we've gone through the preparation to do it that way.
Right.
There's always, I am a real believer in preparation. I don't believe that as a good medium can walk out there, no preparation, and make it happen. But they won't do what they could do if they would just prepare.
That's true. And
They could be doing so much more.
I was just talking last night about that in one of my classes, how yes, I can be out in the middle. I can be out among friends and have a conversation. Then I might get a download or a message.
Mm-hmm.
But my message work is definitely much better when I take the time to invite the guides in and do the thing. It's not that I can't.
I remember one time, and this is years and years and years and years ago, we were doing, at that time at camp, we had Friday evening all message services.
Mhm.
And it was always two mediums. And that night I was scheduled to work, and I was working in India. I had to get myself home to get ready to do that, to meditate, to do everything I felt I needed to do. And one of the things that I teach and that I totally believe in is not eating before you work. And I say that because the process of digestion slows your vibration down. And so, therefore, you're not going to have the same frequency of vibration that spirit can deal with if you've just eaten. Now, you need to have a piece of toast, you need to have a glass of juice, fine. But let's not have a big meal right before we work.
Big juicy steak.
Yeah, not a good thing.
No.
And the lady that I was working with that evening, she had also been working wherever she worked. And she said, but I did stop on the way in and had a couple hot dogs. And I thought,
Oh,
okay, let's see how that goes.
let's
Well,
go.
I'm telling you, it did not go so well for her. It was a good lesson for me And yes, that's what happens if one decides they're going to particularly eat solid food like meat prior to working on the platform or doing trance. I believe, and I teach that if you're going to do a trance session, like a seance, you should not be having anything except tea, juice, something like that.
Right.
Maybe a piece of fruit. You've got to depend on what your physical body will do too, for 5 hours prior to doing it. And if you're doing a single trance session, like I was doing a trance reading yesterday late afternoon, that I would make sure I've had nothing except juice or maybe a piece of fruit um, for at least 3 hours before I do that. I really believe in preparation. A medium can do good work without preparation, but not near as good a work as they would be capable of if
Yes.
they don't do the preparation.
Right. Yeah. That's what we talked about as well. I'm like, you just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like it.
That's right.
Just because you
And
can
it
work.
just may not be so easy that time.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. The number of people on TikTok are saying, "Yep, that's actually how that's how they practice as well." You don't want to be bogged down. You're right. It does. It messes with your vibration.
The frequency of your vibration.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is a natural thing that the digestive process lowers your. If when you're done working, you want to really come back, if you've been doing, maybe I did a 2-hour trance seance and now I'm just still flying a little bit and I want to get myself really grounded, eat a hamburger. That'll drop your frequency down. You'll be ready to go to bed. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, when I do hypnosis for people, I'll tell people like, don't come in with a bunch of food in your stomach. Like, yes, have a light breakfast, have what you would normally have. Just don't do anything heavy, because by the time we do the hypnosis, which if we're being honest, hypnosis, all it is trance.
Yes,
It's a form of trance, but
absolutely.
it's okay that people don't realize that, because we channel our higher selves.
You're
They
working with an altered state.
Yep, their body's moving as if they are that
Mhm.
person in their past life, in their higher self, whatever. But I always tell people, prepare to eat afterwards. Prepare to take in protein afterwards, because they feel all buzzy afterward, not realizing really what they just did on their little journey.
That's right.
But I'll tell them that, like, have something. And even as the practitioner, I always have to eat.
I wouldn't eat a hamburger because I just wouldn't at that time of doing it. But I have something already prepared and usually in the refrigerator. That is what I'm going to eat when I get finished with either a session or with seance, especially. And to make sure that no one drives the car immediately afterwards unless they've had something to help bring them down through their digestive system.
Right. Right. Interesting. So now I want to go back to talk just prepping in general. I know you're preparing in general. Now, I've heard you talk about when you're going to do a seance, when you're going to do like guides and loved one seance, you don't just prep that day.
No. Boy, I wish it were that easy.
I know. Well, and so one of my goals yesterday in my class, we were setting intentions, and I said, okay, my long-term intention is before the end of the year, I'm going to do a guides and loved ones seance. I'm going to do that.
Hallelujah.
That's something I've been just kind of avoiding, because I've been honoring my journey of taking class, learning and understanding the connections. Every time we work in your class in person, I learn something new. I get a new connection, get a new feeling. It's amazing. And I know I haven't been ready to do that yet, but that's what we're doing. But then I'm like, oh, wait, that means I have to have the attention span and remember to start preparing ahead of time, because you've talked about that. You're like, no, I don't just like show up that day and the spirit just steps in. You actually prepare. So can you talk a little bit about not just the importance, but your preparation process before you do a seance?
I would be happy to. And that this preparation process is different than if I'm doing a private session one-on-one with someone. I
Right.
will still prepare, but it will not be for 5 days ahead of time. And again, my belief is I can probably walk, and I have walked in there to do a seance almost cold, and things from everybody's standpoint, they were happy with the seance. But that doesn't mean I don't think it could have been better if
Right.
I had, or maybe spirit could have done some different things. The preparation is with my joy guide Poppy and my philosopher Dr. Buchanan and myself. We are the ones that are going to do that seance together. Normally, if there is a normal in what I do, but normally, I've had as many as 19 people in a Guides and Loved Ones seance. I've had as few as 2 people. I went to 19 one time because I had that many people asking to come to the seance. And at that time, my thought was, if Spirit has sent them here, then it is my responsibility to serve them.
Well, and Spirit trusts you with that, or they wouldn't bring it to you.
Yes. But that was very difficult to prepare for. You'll see why when I talk about the actual preparation. And it isn't just the expectation coming to a Guides and Loved Ones seance with me is that probably 2, maybe another for just a second or something, but probably 2 spirits are going to come in that are identifiable to each sitter and identify themselves and speak to them. And it's called Guides and Loved Ones because that may be guides, it may be loved ones, it may be one of each. It depends on what Spirit decides to do. I'm not asking for control over that. And it isn't that they just say, hello, my name is so-and-so, I love you. That is not the idea. The idea is that they can carry on a short conversation. For 19 people to experience that, they should have brought their sleeping bags. It went on for a very long time. And this has been several years ago, but I can tell you that I'm not usually exhausted after a seance. Anyone that's around me after a seance knows that I'm pretty, I've got to make sure I've come down in order if I'm going to drive or anything. And I was so exhausted. I think I probably fell across my bed in my clothes and woke up the next morning. And I said to Dr. Buchanan, I'm not ever doing a seance again. I'm just not doing this. This is just too hard on me. I can't take all of this. He said, well, how many people were in the seance? Of course, he was right there. And I said, 19. And he said, who was the one that signed all those people up? Oh, I did. Yes. He said, so maybe rather than just not doing seance, you don't have 19 people signed up. You do 2 seances, maybe with 9 people each. What a novel idea. So from that time forward, I kept my seances limited to 12 people. And if it was going to be more than that, I would usually go to a second seance wherever I was at. In today's world, I try to keep it at 9 people, especially if I'm not being, if I'm doing that on camp, and the rule there is usually I can't start till 9 o'clock at night. It's for my own, it's easier on me physically. because that's about my bedtime, you know?
Right.
And then also, if it's more than 9 or 12 people, then it gets too long for the sitters. It's kind of like, can I leave when mine's done? No, you're in here for the duration.
You're in it for the long haul.
So I now, it's between 9 and 12, and there's a couple people sitting there that goes, and she always adds one more. Yeah. Okay. But thinking about it in that way, and I'm going to be totally in trance for probably 2/3 of that time. There are times I come back to blow my nose or to have a drink of water, and then spirit takes me back in. I am normally, I'm going to use the idea of what my normal is during a week-long seminary at Camp Chesterfield.
Okay.
I schedule my main trance seance for Thursday night. And whoever I have signed up at the end of the day on Monday is who's going to be in that seance. I'm not going to change it or keep adding to it. Even if somebody for some reason notifies me and says I'm not going to be able to come and I signed up, that just means we have one less person.
Right.
I'm not trying to, how many people can I get in there for how much money can I make?
Correct. Right.
It's about making sure that seance vibration is really set up as a sacred space and honored. That's what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I will work once a day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and maybe twice on Thursday. As far as setting in contemplation, I'm not going to call it full meditation. To me, meditation is for a different reason. But sitting in contemplation, thinking about the vibration of each person separately, and listening to Dr. Buchanan, what he wants to tell me about who's coming in or what I should do. Sometimes I remember one time when he kept talking to me about someone coming in for this one person named Black Crow. And finally he says, I want you to go get your Ted Andrews book and read about the meaning of a crow. So that was my preparation for that spirit coming in. But every day I'm listening to Dr. Buchanan and or Poppy. Poppy's the one that goes out and gets these people and vets them and then starts to get them ready. And so during the week, she'll be adding things in. Probably if I, if I have 12 people, let's say I have 9 people coming to a seance, 3 of those people, by that time the seance gets here, I'll kind of know who's going to come in. They've come and talked to me. Those are really nice situations. But the others, I'll just know about the vibration. Or I'll know something like go look up Black Crow. Go do, different things. I am spending time with each recipient's vibration each day is what I'm doing with Dr. Buchanan and Poppy, and they're starting to help me get comfortable with what to expect versus my actually knowing who's coming in.
Right.
And they'll also be telling me how they want the room set up. I don't set everybody, they have to sit in a certain seat. If there's a person that is setting battery for me, they'll be directly across from me. There's some people, well, let me say that differently. I always want people that are sitting on each side of me at the front of the circle close to me to be people's vibration that I'm familiar with.
Right. So
it doesn't interrupt my flow. And then basically everybody else can sit wherever they want. That's kind of a quick overview of how I prepare myself for a seance.
I love that. I mean, I think it, and I talk a lot about, vibration and all that. So it does make a lot of sense how you would just sit like you said, sitting in contemplation, but allowing yourself to feel that person's connection and vibration. Because I feel like going back to when I do hypnosis and pulling in higher self and doing
very similar. Yes.
Very similar in just understanding the frequency. And if I'm looking at it from a scientific point of view, it's, oh, this particular spirit's at this frequency. So we have to, and that spirit has never come through and spoken. So there's merit to that. Like, okay, we're going to need to connect this spirit and make sure frequencies aligned. Like that's how Lily shows me.
Yes, it is to me, of course, Reverend Michelle that we spoke of earlier, very on, she was once doing a sermon in the chapel, and she says, I was in the congregation, and she says, of course, one of the things I've learned from Reverend Glenda is that everything is vibration. Everything is vibration. And she says, I'm so glad you're here today to hear me testify to that. And I said, well, it's true. Everything is vibration. And so taking the time to get comfortable with the vibration just of the sitter, taking the time to get comfortable if Poppy's already selected the spirit and is starting to get them into the triangulation of the vibration between the spirit, myself, and the sitter, which is what has to happen with each spirit that comes in, getting to feel that vibration. It helps Dr. Buchanan and Poppy and myself know what frequency they're going to bring that spirit in on. It's not just about me preparing. It's about all that I'm working with preparing.
Which goes back to our team.
That's right.
It's a team effort.
And there is, I'll put a plug in here. On Labor Day weekend.
So excited
for that. I believe is the 30th and 31st of August, and Monday, September 1st, then we are going to have a trance weekend. And I have 5 teachers, including myself, teaching in that, and we'll be demonstrating, and we will be having both lecture and participation by the students. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about that made that hit in my mind is that there is a fear line that every medium has. I've never met the medium that doesn't. That the first time they're going to do guides and loved ones is, what if I don't get the right spirits in? What if they say the wrong name? What if people don't know them? Well, we just set that up to happen, didn't we? But there is a way to start preparing yourself as before you're going to do that type of guides and loved ones. There's another way to prepare yourself to do part of the preparation during the seance.
Right.
And we're going to work on that as part of that, practicing that. Reverend Jay Flagling is going to be teaching that part of it, and I'm going to assist him. And everyone will have the experience of doing that preparation with a couple spirits and participants, and then being able to demonstrate it in that way. We do that in our class sometimes. You're very familiar with it, but it's normally, that part is often left out being taught. And I think it is so important.
Yeah. I'm so looking forward to that weekend. It's already in my calendar. And
it isn't posted yet. It ought to be getting posted, I'm hoping, by the end of this week. Okay. But that's the dates, and it is going to happen. So
yeah, I am super excited. I know that there's going to be people that I work with that are going to probably come in. A friend of mine is actually talking about coming in from Oregon to stay with me that weekend. So she's a practicing medium now. She does trance as well, but being able to come in and experience it, especially being on the grounds at Camp Chesterfield. And then I'm just super excited that I get to demonstrate.
Yeah.
Me too. So excited. Because I've had a feeling it's a whole different ball game than just being in class. But
Oh,
being
it is very much a different ball game. One of the things that actually two, three, myself and two, so two of four of the teachers are people that I have had the opportunity and the honor to help with getting them ready to be certified at camp as trance mediums. And they're going to be teaching and demonstrating. And it is such a difference when you're doing it in class. And then when you take that big step of doing a seance, particularly guides and loved ones, and then there's a whole different vibration that happens when you step on the platform and do trance. I was fortunate, they hadn't done trance on the platform for over 35 years at the time that Reverend Louise said to myself and four other students, so five of us, we're going to do, she was president at the time, so she could say this. We're going to do a gala on the platform, and the five of you are going to do stand-up trance demonstration. Now, after we all got done shaking, because we had never even seen it done on the platform, it became such a joy to do that. And then after that, there were a couple of us, Reverend Juana Irvine, Louise's daughter, and I continued to do that for quite a few years before it hasn't been done recently again. It is a whole different feeling. It's the same as doing a private reading compared to doing a gallery reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just had a question. What was it? Oh, okay. So one of my students wants to know. She says, Reverend Glenda, give us the scoop on how Lorenda is as a student.
I honestly think she's a very good student.
Thank you.
And that's because she and I think a lot alike, because she's willing to take the risk. She's willing to step out there and see what happens when she does something new. And she's willing to learn from it and to work with it. That's the kind of student I can work with real easy. So I think she's an excellent student. She doesn't say, oh, that's not the way I do it.
No.
You know, she's a fine, accomplished, practicing medium. She's about, oh, that's a different way of looking at that. Let me try that. That's the way we all should be. Every day of our work, it should be that way.
Thank you for saying
So
that.
thank you for asking that question. I think she is an excellent student.
Thank you. Well, and I figure if I'm going to...
Sometimes she asks questions that I have to say, I need to think about that one a minute, but that's okay. It keeps me on my toes.
Well, and you put up with my processing out loud too, especially in those early days where in class you're like, all right, well, I'm getting this, bear with me. I'm trying to figure this out because I processed out loud. And I will say you gave me a lot of grace and space for that. And even now I'll still do that I'll never forget the first time I did trance mediumship in class and Rising Phoenix came through. Like we were going in order, but then you jumped to me. I thought I was on fire. And you said, I think you're going next. And I said,
well, there was a choice. Either you went next or you probably were going to be on fire because I could see what was happening. And I thought, well, let's get her out of this.
oh, man. Oh, yeah. But I was like, and this is what's happening right now. So I was kind of processing in real time. But I think sometimes spirit has me do that for my own brain to process, but also I feel like it helps other people feel comfortable.
I think it does too. Some of the best teaching comes out when people will share what they're wanting to know.
Yeah. So, so I try to be a good student. I don't always do my homework in timely fashion, but
well, that's true. Yeah. Okay.
It's fun, that's for sure. I have the books, So we only have we only have like 10 minutes left. I would like to do a little bit of a pivot if that's okay. as we move into the age of Aquarius, we've talked a lot about this in our Spirit Salon.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on, the spiritualism was established in the late 1800s. Here we are 104 years later, trying to navigate age of Aquarius, a whole new way of thinking, social media. We've got the internet. We've got new ways of thinking. We've got the spiritualist camps like Camp Chesterfield. There's not that many left. The camps themselves are just kind of fizzling away, just don't get the support or whatever. What do you see in spiritual? Where do you see that track headed? What are your thoughts on spiritualism and places like Camp Chesterfield or Casadega or Lilydale or even Arthur Findlay College? Like, what are your thoughts on this as an educator and a practicing spiritualist?
I think I have to answer it in a slightly different way,
Okay.
and move into the answer. I believe, and maybe this is because Reverend Louise Irvine, again, one of the things that she taught from the very beginning, and it serves a person working or evolving in spiritual, not spiritualist, but spiritual work of any kind, is to because we have to be discerning.
Yes.
It is important to be discerning because there is a lot of crazy stuff out there. And she says, always ask these questions when you're looking at something new or old. If it was truth 2,000 years ago, and it is truth today, it will be truth 2,000 years into the future. Truth is truth.
Yep.
And so look at where does this, whatever it is, come from? Where are the other truths that are the same truths? And most of the time, if you work through something in that way, you will realize that it's all semantics.
Right.
It's being spoken of very differently than maybe it was 2,000 years ago. Different words are being used, different ways of presenting are being used. But what the ball of light that you're holding in your hands and in your mind is more than 2,000 years old and is truth now, and you have every reason to believe it will be truth in the future. So I always try to evaluate a situation based on was truth, is truth, will be truth. Everything else is semantics, in my estimation. How things are termed, how they're presented, what the tools are that are used. If I go back to the Fox sisters and the beginning of modern spiritualism, there are truths that I still follow today. I believe they are truths. And should be in my mediumship and other people's mediumship or spirit communication or understanding of metaphysics. I often find humor when someone will say, well, now I know you're a spiritualist medium and a spiritualist minister, but are you a metaphysician? I said, I don't know how to do what I do without metaphysics.
Right.
So let's talk about what I always say to them. What is your definition of metaphysics? And then I'll answer your question. Or I love it when someone says to me, now, is that religion you're involved in a Christian religion? And I'll say, oh, can you define your meaning of Christianity for me? And I'll answer based on what your definition is.
Right.
Because, oh man, so much of it is semantics of both of those.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's looking at it from the metaphysical world or looking at it from the traditional Christianity world, so much of it is understanding the semantics of what's being said
Mm-hmm.
and why it might be. The difference between a monotheistic religion and a polytheistic religion is, in my opinion and understanding, totally semantics. I won't go into that. That's a whole class.
Discussion.
But so in answering that, I think the Fox sisters would be absolutely appalled at you and I on whatever this is, they would say, doing this the way we're doing it, because they did it in people's living rooms only.
Right.
There was no camp. There was no structured religion around it at that time. Spiritualism did not have a structured philosophy around it till Andrew Jackson Davis stole it from Theosophy and brought it to us. And so if you start to understand the truths and where they really come from, and then you look at what is available to share these truths or to share the way we bring spirit communication in, it's bad. We have to allow for evolution.
Yeah.
We can't hold on to all the past as far as how it's done, but rather it's was it truth? Is it truth? Will it be truth? I have a little cartoon that I send out to people sometimes. I used to share this when I was living in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I would come in from the Blue Ridge Mountains. I would drive in once a month for a week or 2 weeks to camp to work. And I had this little cartoon that I would send ahead to Reverend Michelle that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, everything's a changing, and it's a little girl on a motorcycle. Everything's a changing, and I'm part of the change. And I think that's how we should all be.
Yeah.
We accept what is truth. We try to understand. We work with what we're doing, but we understand every one of us has always been and should be part of the change,
Right.
part of the evolution. So I would anticipate things change with the camps.
Mm-hmm.
I anticipate that I'll probably always, you're never supposed to use semantically, but I will probably always feel that I prefer to do trance mediumship in person versus online. But do I do it online now? Oh, yeah. Just means that's still my preference.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to try to be open to change. That is part of the world, but always to be looking at, are we holding on to the truth while we're doing it?
Yes.
So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
perfect answer. That was the perfect answer, because I think I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree, and I hope, I know that the camps themselves tend to be a dying breed, but at the same time, I think there's room for that growth and that opportunity, and I personally think camp is one of the greatest places on the planet. I think it's magical. You walk on the grounds, and humans aside, it's a magical place. It's a magical place, and all the intention of all the work and all the vibration and frequency that's been laid there for the 100 and some years it's been there. And I think it's going to be. I think we're going to see people being called to be there again.
And to know part of the history of those grounds
Mhm.
is that the grounds themselves, not the camp, but the grounds themselves have never been used for anything except spiritual worship.
Mhm.
Prior to when that was purchased by the Indiana Association of Spiritualists, I think in 1865, I might have my date wrong, but the grounds prior to then had been utilized by a Native more than one, but Native American groups to do their meditation and spiritual work prior to going to the mountains. And so there is a vibration within that, the grounds themselves. Someone who comes to live on the grounds, others that have lived there or that live there will say it's really important to you that if you're not going off to work like during the day and you're on the grounds all the time, you should be scheduling 1 or 2 days a week at least that you are totally away from the grounds, because the vibration will become too intensive for you to work in the way you probably want to work.
I never even thought of that.
It is very true. It is so very true. And we used to say, I lived there full time for over 15 years and worked in Indianapolis every day. And then when I married, my husband was from the Colorado mountains. I just thought I should move there. I don't know what that was all about, but I thought I should move there when I married him. So I always came back for 1 week, 1 week a year. 1 week a month, whether I was living in the Rockies or the Blue Ridge. But prior to that, when we were living there I was living there full time, there was kind of a joke. We'd say, oh, so-and-so's getting a little crazy. She's got to get off the grounds for a while, because there was someone who hadn't. You would start to know they were vibrating at a little bit of a different intensity. It's real.
Well, that makes absolute sense, because I've always said, not always, yeah, it's true, that I was never a feeler of energy. I could go into a room where there was a house that was completely haunted, and I'd be like, cool wallpaper. Like, it wouldn't even faze me. But now that I've worked the way that I do and have worked on my vibration and cleared all this energy and done all this deep work, when I walk onto the grounds, it's just like a light switch comes on, and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm buzzy already. This is great."
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
I got a goofy smile on my face, and I'm like, so, well, I just want to say thank you so much. I know a lot of people have been really looking forward to getting to chat, like getting to know you a little bit better and getting to see you, because I talk about you and camp all the time. And I'm so grateful for the journey that you have led me on in this way. And yeah, I know we're going to give Spirit credit, but you have really helped me be the person that I am and the medium that I am. And I've been able to pass that on to others. And I know this is just I'm just one person, and you've helped so many, and I just adore you. And I think you're just a fantastic human. And so I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on and do this show with me. And I know a lot of people were very excited to meet you and get to know you. So any final thoughts before we?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Those are kind words, and I know they come from your heart, so they mean even more to me. If I would say that any words I have to say is, wherever you are on your path, allow yourself to be on your path. Allow yourself to find gratitude and joy for whatever is happening on your path, because you're going to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to learn from it. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk today and to share some of what I've learned over the years of being a medium. And, I'm still doing that. And I feel like Spirit is allowing me to continue to have a great journey in my life and to be experiencing the magic. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. I really appreciate you guys. If you missed part of it, make sure you go back and watch the replay on YouTube. It'll be up. Instagram failed today, which is fine. It is what it is. It'll also be on Facebook. So thank you all for coming in, and we'll see you guys soon.
Bye-bye.
And then we're going to end this. All right. Bye, friends.